This is Distant Replay, the podcast that goes back in time to relive all the greatest events that we witnessed in sports. From upsets, to championships, to cultural moments, we discuss it all. Coming up on today's episode.
Owens is ahead. Sundberg and Berkman are fighting. Owens up, challenges Rakoff. Metcalf comes up, but Owens wins in 10.3. Second, Metcalf America. Third, Owens up, Holland.
Taking you back to August 3rd, 1936. Yes, 1936, almost 90 years ago. And there actually is video footage of this 100-meter race in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. Mike, this is definitely the oldest event we're going back to. But when you think about Olympics, and we're still kind of in this Olympic mode right now, it's one of our last Olympic shows we're going to do before we move on. But this Jesse Owens performance in 36 with the backdrop of Hitler and Germany there, this is one of the most substantial and significant events of the 20th century.
Yeah, there's certain events that stick out to you, right? So from a sports perspective that sort of transcend sports. This is one of them, and this is probably the most early one in terms of when it happened that I can remember. And and this is just it's amazing that there's footage of the races that we can watch still today.
Pretty good footage, and we're going to put it up on our website, distantreplaypodcast.com. If you do speak German, you will appreciate it more because all the commentary over the video is in German, so I didn't understand a single word. It definitely felt like you were back in Nazi Germany, Mike, just listening to the video. But we'll put that on our website, distantreplaypodcast.com. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram and on YouTube as well. If you're listening there, please hit subscribe. If you're listening on podcast, please follow us there as well. So this event with Jesse Owens, Mike, I think the first thing you have to do is kind of talk about where we are in the world history, because we all know about Hitler, right, in World War II, but this is prior to that, about 3 years before Germany invades Poland.
Yeah, so from a date and year perspective, Hitler takes control of Germany in 1933, okay? This Olympics is in 1936, like Ben mentioned, early August 1936. Germany invades Poland in 1939. So from a world perspective, we know what Hitler stands for and what the Nazi Party stands for. We don't know yet what his grand plan is when he invades Poland.
Right.
And that he's using these Olympics to sort of showcase the Nazi way of life and how it's superior to all others in the world. And there was talk from a United States standpoint of boycotting these Olympics because of what Hitler stood for. Mm-hmm. In the end, they decided to go ahead and send their athletes. But that gives a little bit of a snapshot on where we're at from a world history perspective.
Yeah, and that's why there was a lot of talk about people trying to keep Jesse from going over there, not to help spotlight what was happening over there, to boycott what was going on. But I think he kind of wanted to be out there to help kind of bring light to what was happening, and also for anybody that was black or being persecuted, that he could kind of stand for them and help kind of dispel that myth of this Aryan supremacy that Hitler was pushing on everybody. So that was a big deal as well. But you got to remember where Jesse Owens was too. Now, by the way, Mike, Jesse Owens is from Alabama originally. I don't know if you knew that, but he is one of Alabama's great athletes of all time. So I do.
I was not aware. I was not aware of that because he went to college in the Midwest, right?
Yeah, he went to Ohio State, but I think when he was like 9, he moved. His family moved up to Ohio State, or moved up to Cleveland, or up to Ohio, because I think they wanted more opportunity, as you would imagine. That time in Alabama, probably not a lot of opportunity for Jesse and his family, so they moved north, and it all worked out obviously much better for him. But still was born in Alabama. I will note that. But at Ohio State, he had a tremendous career, and so much so that a year before these Olympics, when he was at Ohio State, he was competing in the Big Ten meet that they had in Michigan. This was in May of 1935, so just about a year before this Olympics took place. He had 4 world records established over the course of a day. And I think even more specifically, over the course of like 45 minutes, he would have the world record in the 100-yard dash, the long jump, the 220-yard low hurdles. I'm not even sure that event's still around anymore. And then the 200 meters. So he had this like impressive feat. And I think even so much so they kind of coined it the greatest 45 minutes in sports because of what he was able to do.
Yeah, because you're saying, go back to what Ben just said. We're talking world records.
Yeah.
Not Big Ten records, not NCAA records. We're talking 4 world records in under an hour. I mean, I'm surprised that obviously this event overshadows almost anything that's ever happened in the history of sports that we're talking about right now. But
Yeah.
it's surprising. That's not that's something I bet you not many people know what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know it before we went back and research. Did you?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah. So he's obviously a huge athlete and one of the great track and field athletes in the world at this point, and he's gearing up for this competition. Now, another interesting thing, Mike, that I just didn't even think about, and it kind of blew my mind when I read it, but they talked about how Owens and his teammates set sail on the SS Manhattan to go over to Germany for the Olympics. And I guess I should know this because of the planes weren't flying like back then. Flight wasn't a thing really. But the fact that I just don't even think about that these Olympians would hop on a ship to go across the world to compete.
Unreal. Like talk about nowadays everything's so about making conditions optimal for athletes to perform.
Yeah.
How optimal is it that would it take a week to get there?
I have no idea how long it took.
I have no clue, but that's crazy. They're all on a ship going over there. That's something you doesn't even enter your mind, and it seems so bizarre. But yeah, it makes sense for the time period.
It was the SS Manhattan, Mike. It was the largest ship ever operated by the U.S. Coast Guard. Eventually caught fire in 1942 and was rebuilt as a troop ship. So just a little bit of history on the SS Manhattan, but it blew my mind reading that, and it shouldn't, because you should think back to that time that's just how it was. But can you imagine?
Not only that, all the athletes have to get to where the ship is.
Right.
They have to get on the ship.
Took a train to where the ship was.
Took a train. Yeah, we're talking 2 weeks to get to the Olympics. That's funny.
The event was in early August, so you left very early July to start making your way to Germany. I mean, just think about that, man. That's crazy. But so he gets over there, and this video is very interesting because I think it has a couple of the early heats. So I'm curious your thoughts on this race itself, Mike, because a few things stood out to me. I think number one, obviously, is the quality of the athletes and how they're dressed, with loose baggy shorts, kind of pulled up really high. It does not look like you're watching the top runners and sprinters in the world.
Yeah, some things I noticed were the sort of the getup they had on, right, and how they had AAU. Wasn't the stuff they were wearing AAU uniforms?
I don't know.
They weren't even. I don't think they were even said USA on them. I have to go back again. But one other thing I noticed, the video is very clear for 1936.
Yeah,
their cleats. Did you notice the cleats?
What about
and
it?
how they fit? They were kind of they looked like socks almost.
Yeah.
They fit the foot very snug. I thought that was interesting. And I think the thing that sticks out the most for me from a racing perspective is the fact that the track is clay at this point.
Yeah. You can't tell that immediately when you see the footage, but you see the guys, the starters that are all when they run, they get done running, they're packing the clay back down for their blocks. Yep. They don't have blocks back then. You're taking off the clay. Yeah,
you're taking off the clay. And then what about the guy shooting off the gun?
Yeah.
It looked like it was a real gun, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. The guy shooting off the gun, though, man. There was a point at one of the heats where they false started.
Yeah.
And when they false start, he has a reaction come on, what are you doing?
Yeah, no.
It's just that was interesting. I've never seen that before. That guy was worth the price of admission too. The guy shooting off the gun, because typically when you watch a race, you see the guys in the starting blocks, and then you hear the gun go off and they run. Well, right. In this, they were showing the guy shooting off the gun, and then they'd go to the race.
Yeah.
So it was kind of odd from that perspective.
Yeah, his reaction was he only had a certain amount of bullets, and he was frustrated that he had to use one on that false start. We're not going to have enough to get to the end here if you guys keep doing this.
I took a sip of water just now, and I literally, first time ever in podcast history, I almost spit it out when you said that, because you're right. That's exactly what his reaction was like.
But you can tell Jesse Owens is a completely different breed than everybody else in terms of just how much more fit he is, number one. His running style seems a lot more modern than these other guys. The other guys seemed like they were trying so hard.
Oh, man.
And Jesse was just kind of cruising.
The other guys seemed like they were an elementary school field day. When the kids are just running really fast and their arms are moving all over the place. And they're flailing everywhere. And Jesse had, like you mentioned, has the good form. And everything is just perfect with the way he runs. And it reminded me a lot of Michael Johnson, where like, hey, you knew he was going to win. It's just a matter of by how much.
Yeah, and he seemingly got better each heat, and finally at the end, we see him race a couple of times, and finally that 100-meter final, he takes off, and again, it's the same type thing, right? Where it's kind of a close race a little bit early on, but by the end, he's pulling away. And I just pulled it up to kind of watch as we're talking here, Mike, and like he talked about guys flailing their arms. There's one guy next to him in that final that's just like he's running. Like I don't know how he makes it to the final with his running style. Like his arms literally are all over the place.
Yeah, he's like a try-hard. He's like a try-hard. He's those guys that just try hard. Like it looks like physically they're trying hard.
Yeah.
And like laboring. Like that's what this guy looked like. But back then, he's a world-class sprinter.
It literally makes you laugh when you watch it.
I know. And you step back and think of like the moment that we're in here, and it's like, oh wow, it's at least you get some humor out of it.
Yeah, and he would end up winning the gold, and he would be right ahead of his teammate Ralph Metcalfe, who finished second in this race. But this was one of 4 gold medals for Jesse Owens, and I don't know what the crowd makeup was. I'm sure there was a ton of German fans. I don't know how many fans from other countries traveled, especially considering that you had to take ship to get there. But it seemed like a lot of fans were actually pulling for Jesse Owens.
Yeah, that's something where I thought, from I could be wrong, but from what I've heard throughout the years is that maybe the fans were scoffing at him when he won. But from the footage that we saw, it did not seem like that.
Yeah, maybe it was one of those reactions where they were just, I don't know. You said scoffing at the different culture. Maybe a different way of doing things, but it felt like they were pulling for.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Jesse.
You always heard how he was like kind of not accepted there, and he probably wasn't, like from a social perspective. But that, like you said, maybe there was people from other countries there though that were kind of the ones cheering.
Yeah, and there was actually there was some interaction between Jesse Owens and Hitler too. I think they actually had a brief moment. They passed and actually addressed each other, waved to each other. I think, according to some of the research, it wasn't. Hitler did skip a lot of stuff, right? And you can kind of tell that story, but it did seem like he did have one, I guess I would say, positive interaction with Owens.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, from what I read, and I read this in multiple sources, is that at the beginning of the Olympics, Hitler was going around, and when the German athletes, the Germans, who I believe won more medals than any other country in this Olympics also, as a whole, but that he was only going around and congratulating the German athletes when they won. And the head of the IOC basically said, hey, look, you're either going to congratulate everyone or no one. Like, you can't just cherry pick who you're going to congratulate after they win. And then basically the story that I saw on multiple websites is that Hitler then just stopped congratulating anyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So from that perspective, yeah, he adjusted his behavior that way. So the part of Owens being snubbed by Hitler, that took on a life of its own, and it was in like newspapers worldwide. But there's some debates on whether that's actually the way it happened.
Right.
But still, just regardless of when you talk about an event like this, you don't even want to make it about a scumbag like Hitler. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's about Jesse Owens and what he accomplished, and in the environment he accomplished it in a country that, look, they would prefer him not to be there. Let's be real about it. And he went in there and he took care of his business and put on a great performance.
He did indeed. It was a good race. Pretty cool to go back and watch 1936, Mike. This is definitely the most different event we've seen, just in terms of how everything was operated and organized and executed at that point compared to what it is now. But Jesse Owens definitely stood out, as you could tell his greatness just by watching this short 4-minute video that we have. Yeah,
just one of those athletes that sort of transcend sports, There's probably a handful of them throughout the course of sports, and he's one of them.
Indeed. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Distant Replay. We go back and watch events. We also do true crime. We do documentary recaps, all these things. We do every single week, so please hit a subscribe for us on YouTube, on whatever podcasting app you listen on. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, and, of course, on distantreplaypodcast.com. I'm going to put this video up there on our website, distantreplaypodcast.com, 1936 100-meter dash. Jesse Owens winning in front of that German Nazi crowd. Pretty incredible footage that we still have. It's got to be some of the earliest footage of the Olympics we have, and it's actually pretty clear, pretty clean. So definitely would recommend you checking that out when you get some time. Mike, we'll chat again soon, man. This was a good one to go back to.
Yeah, this is one of those, again, events that transcend sports. I'm glad there was footage that we could make an episode out of. And Check us back next week. Rate, review, subscribe, and until next time.